in a landslide vote in his favor. My next guest says there is speculation that Carney could appoint a so-called wartime cabinet in the near-term future. Let's talk with Andrew Perez. He's a Liberal strategist and a principal at Perez Strategies. Andrew, lots to talk about, and thank you for joining us. Let's cut to the chase. What you see an election call coming very soon, and an election in either late April or early May. Tell us how you see the calendar playing out.
That's right, Paul. Mark Carney right now is the Prime Minister designate. He's already been briefed by Prime Minister Trudeau. I expect him to be formally sworn in as Prime Minister alongside a revamped, smaller cabinet by the end of this week. I expect that an election will likely be called on Sunday, March 23rd, for an election day on April 28th. Or May 5th. So all of this, there's going to be a sequence of events in the coming days leading to the country being plunged into a general federal election. And there are a number of things that the new prime minister will need to do in the lead up to that election.
Our featured guest, Colin Szynski, wants to ask you a question as well. Colin, what's your question to Andrew?
Yeah, my question is, before we get an election call, would we see some kind of an an economic statement, or do we think that would get rolled into releasing of a platform over a campaign?
Yeah, I think given the very short timeline here that there won't be time for a standalone economic statement. That would require incoming Prime Minister Carney to bring back the House of Commons, which I don't think he will do. He does not hold a seat. And so I think that will be rolled into an election platform, which is being prepared as we speak, which will really draw upon a number of the policy commitments that Carney made throughout this 7-week leadership campaign, really zeroing in on the U.S.-Canada trade war and a dollar-for-dollar retaliatory approach that Carney has laid out, but also going far beyond that and really a coordinated strategy that goes far beyond retaliatory tariffs to include a middle-class tax cut, cutting down interprovincial trade barriers, diversifying our trading relationships across the globe, leveraging AI across the public service, and changing the federal budgeting process, divvying it up into a capital budget and an operating budget. Carney has promised to balance the operating budget within 3 years and spend, the capital budget really zeroing in on massive investments in clean technology, infrastructure, rail, port, transit to really drive this economy and make up for the fact that we are facing this existential economic threat. We could lose as much as a million Canadian jobs.
When we talk about diversifying our trade relationships away from the overwhelming reliance on the U.S. market, a lot of people say you can't have that discussion without talking about oil and gas and pipelines and liquefied natural gas facilities. He has not had a lot to say on that part of our trade relationship. Would you agree with that? He has not been nearly as vocal on the benefits of, for instance, selling liquefied natural gas to other markets in the world, as has been his soon-to-be rival, Pierre Poilievre.
That's correct, Paul. And I do fully expect now that Mr. Carney is pivoting from a leadership race into the Prime Minister's office and an election campaign, that he will be fleshing out those policies in more detail. He has spoken to the urgent need to expedite natural resource projects across the country to get goods to market. And so I think we'll be seeing more detail on that. But Mr. Carney has been clear that we need those dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs that hit the Americans hard in certain sectors while impacting us the least. But it also starts within our Canadian border. It starts with creating one Canadian economy. We've had for decades 13 distinct economies in Canada, and these interprovincial trade barriers have really impacted our economic growth here at home. And so I do believe that Carney will be rolling out a plan to really build that one Canadian economy and diversify our trading relationships and spending strategically on infrastructure projects like natural resource projects to really, leverage our Canadian economy and deal with this threat that we're facing vis-a-vis the Trump administration.
You expect Dominic LeBlanc to remain finance minister in the short term during the very brief life of this current government pre-election. Do you expect LeBlanc to reemerge as finance minister or as a senior minister in an economically related portfolio if Carney and the Liberals were to win an election?
I do, Paul. I think the three cabinet roles that I suspect will remain intact are Dominic LeBlanc at finance. We know that he has very strong relationships in the Trump administration, including with the Commerce Secretary. I suspect that Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly will remain in place, as will Public Safety Minister David McGuinty. Now, the current Trudeau cabinet boasts almost 40 members. I think Carney is going to cut the size of cabinet significantly. It could be down to as few as 20 or 25 members. At the same time, it is, in a sense, a wartime cabinet, and he's going to have to put in place new members of that cabinet to put his own stamp on this government. And there's now speculation that he will bring in unelected officials into the cabinet from different parties, a wartime cabinet. There's been media reports suggesting that the Carney team has already reached out to former Premier Jean Charest to offer him a role. I suspect they will be looking at members of the U.S.-Canada Council that was put together in early January to tackle the trade war. So other possibilities could include former Alberta Premier Rachel Notley, former Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil, and the former Canadian ambassador to the U.S., David McNaughton. So I suspect we'll know what the new cabinet looks like by the end of this week.
Andrew, thank you so much for a great conversation.